Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. Today I have but one watch, and it is the Audemars Piguet Arnold All-Star Offshore in 48 millimeters rose gold. Now, why do I only have one watch and not a whole bunch of watches to talk about? It's because Arnold had a huge relationship with Audemars Piguet, and they made so many watches and so many collabs with him that it's a topic that can stand all on its own in a single vlog. So what will I talk about today besides this monster of a watch? I'm also going to talk about the All-Star Perpetual calendar in white, the All-Star Perpetual calendar in rose gold, the All-Star dual time in platinum. Then, of course, you had the movie watches. You had the 6-day watch, which came in a white dial, also came in a black dial. You had the Terminator watches that came in a white dial, also came in a black dial. And you also had the end of days, the PVD one. Then, of course, you had the Governor watch, the Governor's 2 watch that was made in stainless steel, that ended with the Legacy, and last but not least, the Arnold All-Star, which I'll talk about today and show you a close-up. So what's there to say about the Arnold All-Star? It was a limited edition made in 350 pieces. It is a 48 millimeter monster of a watch. It weighs a ton because it is in rose gold. It probably has the weight of 3 T3s combined. Beautiful brown dial, a hornback alligator strap, and a huge rose gold hang buckle. Original retail price on this watch was $83,100. Again, don't ask me why the extra $100. But at $83,000, when this watch first came out, it was during that whole offshore boom from AP, where every limited edition AP was selling through the roof, and this thing traded at $85,000 to $95,000. I know of one that actually even sold over $100 because there was a customer out there so hard pressed for it. So what is the All-Stars After School Adventures program by Arnold? It's basically a charity that Arnold created back in 1999, I believe, to help underprivileged children with after-school programs. So rather than these kids running around and getting into trouble on the streets, they created a place and a time for them to spend with each other doing productive things when their parents cannot watch after them while they are at work full-time. So I mentioned retail value is $83,100. In a hot market, this watch was fetching over retail. Today, you're going to pick this watch up anywhere from $53,000 to $58,000 US, depending on the condition and how complete the watch is. Next, we're going to talk about the other All-Star versions. I'll start with the Perpetual calendars. They made a Perpetual calendar in rose gold, as well as they made it in white gold. And the retail prices were pretty hefty on those pieces. The white gold was $116,000 even, and I think the rose gold was about $111,000. Never did understand why white gold watches were more retail value than rose gold watches, but that's a side conversation altogether. So these watches are actually very complicated because they are a Perpetual calendar chronograph. Now, Patek Philippe actually considers their Perpetual calendars chronographs a grand complication, where Audemars does not. However, they did come out around the same time where a 5970 Perpetual calendar chronograph Patek was a heavy-duty popular piece, and they were trading at over $100,000. So Audemars figured, you know what, we're going to jump on a bandwagon of the complication, as well as the fact that this is a limited edition. They made 100 in each metal, and you would expect those things to go over lists like all the other AP pieces. Well, unfortunately, they did not. The first few did trade close to retail. Some actually sold at retail, but that quickly went down. A, because of the hefty price tag, and B, these were not offshores. This was a Jules Audemars, and nobody really cared much at the time. Everybody wanted the offshores, the T3s, they wanted the end of days, they wanted all those things. Didn't care much about the Perpetual calendar. The other version of an All-Stars was the Platinum All-Stars Dual Time. It was a limited edition of 99 pieces at a retail price of $86 and change. I think it was $86.7. Again, it was another flop. It was not an offshore. It was a Jules Audemars Dual Time in Platinum with a really hefty price tag. Those watches did bad right out the door. You can buy them at a discount. Some people bought them at 20 off. Some people bought them as much as even 30 off. And we're talking about at the time where the limited edition offshores were trading at 20 to 30% over their list price. This is just how bad the Jules models were for AP at the time, and honestly still. So what's the value of those Perpetual calendars today? Believe it or not, you'll be able to pick those up on a secondary market anywhere from $30,000 to $35,000, which is about a third of their original retail price. So what's the resale value of the Platinum Dual Time Arnold All-Stars? Same fate. That's a watch that I've seen sold as low as $25,000, even less for a pre-owned piece. So you'll be able to pick that up anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 should you decide you actually want one. Now let's talk about movie watches. First, let's talk about the End of Days. Back in 1999, the movie End of Days came out. And Arnold wore a PVD offshore called The End of Days in the movie, and therefore the limited edition of 500 pieces came out. Its original retail price was in the low teens. How high did the price get on that watch? During the hot market, this watch managed to climb all the way up to $60,000. But that was not a natural climb like it was for the titanium Montoyas or the Baricellas and so on and so forth. There was one gentleman, I won't mention his last name, his first name was John, out of Chicago, that decided he's going to buy up as many End of Days as he can and raise the market on them for them to ultimately become a $100,000 and the Holy Grail limited edition AP. Well, guess what? He took the watch from 20 to 25 to 30 to 45 to 40 to 50, all the way out to $60,000. I sold him 11 pieces. And as I was doing it, the price kept climbing and climbing and climbing. The only issue is that price ticket was a result of one single individual buying up all those watches in a short amount of time. In reality, at the time, the watch was worth maybe $35,000 to $40,000. Today's market, the watch has come back down to under 20. So anywhere from $18,000 to $25,000, depending on how good and complete the piece is what you're gonna buy this watch at today. Just a short year later, another Arnold movie came out called The Sixth Day. In that movie, he wore a humongous Jules Audemars. It was a 50mm Jules Audemars called XX, or AKA The Sixth Day. Came in two versions, white and black. This was a limited edition of only 50 pieces, and this is not something that you could buy. There was a charity event ran at the premiere of the movie back in 2000, where with a $29,000 donation, you were able to pick up one of those pieces. At the time the limited edition market got hot in AP, a few years later, the 6-day watches started surfacing for 50, for 60, for 80. Some people were asking $100,000 for them. Why? Because you couldn't really get them. Today, there are a few out there. If you look online, there's a couple of guys out there selling them for around $30,000 to $35,000. What are they really worth? It's what one is willing to pay for them, because there was really never a market created for those pieces. They were all sold out at the premiere, well, quote unquote sold out, and they never really appeared back on the market till a few years later. And those that actually bought them, for the most part, kept them all, because these are not the type of people that needed to resell their watch or care for the fact that their $29,000 donation now became a $50,000 or $60,000 watch. Really cool piece. Love the watch, love the fact that it's a huge size. And I think the fact that it's a 50mm watch is what makes it hold its value to date, even though it's a Jules Audemars, not an offshore. Of course, as far as movie watches is concerned, last but not least, it's the Terminator watches. So Terminator watches, aka APT3s, were made for the movie Terminator 3. They made 1,000 pieces, some black dials, some white dials. If anybody tells you that they know how many whites and how many blacks were made, they're lying to you. Nobody actually knows that. It was a total edition of 1,000 pieces. Original retail tag on these things? $19,000. What did these things trade for in the hot market? When the limited offshores market was hot, these things went all the way up to $45,000 to even $50,000. For some reason, people believed that the white dial is more rare than the black, so they paid a little more for the white and a little less for the black. Then it was the other way around. They felt like there were more whites and there were less blacks, so they paid $48,000 for the black and $45,000 for the white. Made no sense, and the reason being really is it's what was out on the market at that time. If there were more white dials, people felt like the black was more rare. In reality, nobody really knew the truth, but they were flying off the shelves. Fast forward to today, once the market took a correction, today these watches are trading in the mid-20s to high 20s, which you would think, oh wow, it took such a dump. Well, it really didn't. There was a huge hype back then. Once the market has come down, as it should, the watch still retails at almost 40% over its original retail value. That's not bad at all. Personally, after the Alacrite concept, the T3 is probably my second favorite watch from Audemars Piguet. That would wrap up the APs that Arnold wore in the movies. Next, Arnold decided, you know what, I want something that's me, something that belongs to me, that doesn't belong to a movie, that doesn't belong to a charity. I want an Arnold Schwarzenegger watch. He came up with the yellow gold Arnold offshore that belonged to him and only him. It carried his signature in the back of the case. It also carried his signature in the box. It was all about Arnold. Beautiful watch. Limited edition of 400 pieces. Original retail price was around $32,000. The market on the piece today is around there. Low 30s to mid 30s, so maybe a little bit under retail, a little bit over retail. A beautiful watch overall, signature brown dial against the yellow gold with the brown strap makes the watch looks beautiful. It's a nice pickup for somebody who doesn't want to spend an arm and a leg on a limited edition offshore. Of course, during the hot time, this watch went all the way up to over $50,000 is what it traded at back then. I'm going to skip the Governor's watch, and I'm going to talk about that last, and I'll tell you why in a second. I'm going to talk about the Legacy. The Legacy was that quote-unquote last limited edition that was made for Arnold Schwarzenegger, another 48 millimeter behemoth, just like the All-Star I showed you today. Limited edition of 1,500 pieces with a hefty retail price tag of $47,900. This is when AP has already caught on that their limited edition can fetch more than $20,000 for a chronograph. And the watch is named exactly what it is, because this man and his relationship with Audemars Piguet was exactly that. It was a legacy. In fact, if you do a total limited edition count on how many limited edition APs were made with Arnold, it is the biggest one in history of Audemars Piguet. The closest second collaboration that AP had after Arnold was the relationship they had with Timolinghi. They made the City of Sails in platinum, rose, and stainless steel. They made the Alinghi Polaris. They made the Ladies Alinghi. And then later they made the Team Alinghi in platinum, rose, and carbon. I mentioned I was going to talk about the Governor's watch last. Now, the Governor's 2 watch was a limited edition of only 25 pieces. And it actually has the seal of the Governor of California, the Honorable Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the back of the watch. Original retail was actually $40,000, but it was never offered to the public. It was sold to quote-unquote special clientele. These were boutique customers, longtime customers of AP, celebrities, etc., etc. Because this was during a time where every limited edition AP was flying off the shelves, it was considered a special privilege for you to be able to actually buy that watch for $40,000. And rumor actually has it that 35 were made, and the other 10 were given away at charity events or auctioned off at charity events. And if you were one of those lucky guys that actually bid on the watches at an auction, you got one of these, which is a plaque, or a stand rather, that says, "Thank you for the heavy lifting." And it comes with this nifty little lucite dumbbell.
Don't be a girly man.
Not bad for 40 grand, right? So you would think that something so ultra rare would trade for buku dollars? Absolutely not. This is the reason why I wanted to talk about this watch last, is not every limited edition is worth buku dollars. In fact, the whole limited edition hype is done for the watch industry entirely. Whether it's AP, whether it's Hublot, whether it's Richard Mille, it doesn't really matter. Limited editions overall have zero appeal to the average watch buyer collector, because you know what? They are tired of it. A limited edition should only be made once in a blue moon. If a watch buyer like Patek comes out with a limited edition and they make one a year or 2 a year at best, or maybe one every few years, it actually carries some value behind it, some collectability behind it. Brands like AP, brands like Hublot, and a multitude of other brands, when they make these limited editions, nobody even pays attention anymore. As a result, you can find this watch online for under $20,000 today. And the last one that sold at Christie fetched a whopping $12,000, a pretty far cry from a $40,000 retail price. Now, companies are still continuing to produce a slew of different limited edition. IWC, I think, came out with a 28 or 30 or so different limited edition pieces for the 150th anniversary. That's just too much. An average watch buyer or collector or even a dealer will not pay attention to a limited edition unless you're talking about a Patek Philippe. And even they are starting to produce more and more pieces, and that's going to end up biting them in the ass at the end. Who's the one brand that doesn't do limited editions? You guessed it, the king of all brands, Rolex, which is also something I happen to have on my wrist today. So what's on my wrist? It is the Day 2 in platinum. Subtle, for those that know this is a platinum watch. For those that don't know, it may look like a regular stainless steel watch. Overall, one of my favorite pieces to wear, and it happens to match my 50 caliber Desert Eagle. Isn't that nice? So guys, I hope you enjoyed me quickly running through the limited edition and the relationship Arnold Schwarzenegger had with Audemars Piguet. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. And it's gonna be corny as shit.